Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jessica Green, and I am the Artistic Director of the Houston Center Art Society. And we have an incredible program tonight. This is an amazing panel. We have such an incredible group of artists and thinkers that are joining us. So the title of this discussion is Visual Storytelling Across the Haitian Diaspora, a Fatherland panel discussion. And this is in conjunction with our month-long run of Candice D'Meza's film Fatherland, which we are showing in honor of Haitian Heritage Month. Go Haitian Heritage Month, all month long, May. And this also is in partnership with the incredible Houston Theater Company and Theater Stages. So y'all are in for a treat. I'm going to share the bios of our illustrious panel, and then we're going to bring them all on and get this conversation going. While we're talking, please keep your questions in mind. Think about what you want to ask. We're going to leave some time for audience questions. So please, share them in the chat as we, continue to speak. So first and foremost, we are going to be joined by Candice D'Meza, who is an actor, playwright, multidisciplinary artist, and mother of two based in Houston, Texas. A proud member of the Actors Equity Association, she has been called one of 7 young Houston theater actors to watch, and was awarded the 2018 Best Utility Player Award by the Houston Press. Social practice in nature, her projects manifest as participatory theater performance, workshops, and audio-visual installation. Her artistry aims to activate the public space for the reclamation and repatriation of self through song, dance, theatrical performance, audio-visual installation, diary, memoir, and film. Her work explores themes related to identity and African spiritual technologies of connection, land, and water. One such project currently in development, Fatherland, which is now up and running. You can watch it on our website, cinemahcx.org. Grant funded by the City of Houston, is an audiovisual immersive performance that serves as a community grief ritual for all of those who have lost an emotional or physical homeland, or by force or by fate. Currently, her creative writing explores the uses of fantasy and imagination as radical liberatory practice. Her ongoing series of liberatory microplays, 30 Ways to Get Free, uses speculative fiction, sci-fi, and Afrofuturism to imagine liberated Blackness across the expanse of time. Some of these microplays have been published by the Centos Review and are to be filmed and streamed as part of the Catastrophic Theater's 2021 season. So that is Candice's bio. Next, I am going to share the bio of one of the artists that is joining her, France-Luce Benson. As a playwright and arts educator, France-Luce Benson was named Someone to Watch by American Theater Magazine. And her play, Talking Piece, topped the list of the most impactful plays in the Together LA ATLA 2020 Virtual Theater Festival. Her play, Ghosts of the Diaspora, will have its world premiere this summer at the Williamstown Theater Festival. Tigress of Sam Dominique, the second in her trilogy about the Haitian Revolution, was featured at the Atlantic Theater Company's Afro-Caribbean Mix Fest 2021. And she was named a finalist of the Bay Area Playwrights Festival in 2020. And this play was also selected for the Playwrights Center Afro-Atlantic Playwrights Festival in 2019. Douce Femme on the Edge of la Révolution played at the Global Voices Theatre in London and at the New Black Fest in NYC. She is a recipient of the Miranda Family Foundation grant for her play Detained, and an Alfred P. Sloan Foundation New Play Commission for her play The Devil's Salt, and a Princess Grace Award runner-up for Boat People. Additional honors include the Zoetrope Grand Prize for her screenplay Caroline's Wedding, Dramatist Guild Fellow 2016 and 2017, Sam French OOB Festival winner, NNPN Award for Risen from the Dough, and 3-time Kilroy List honorable mention. Residencies include the Camargo Foundation in France, and another amazing residency in Bahia, Brazil. Her plays have productions, workshops, and readings at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, Crossroads Theater, New Jersey, City Theater of Miami, the Playwright Center in Minneapolis, Loyola Marymount University, Global Black Voices in London, and in New York, New Black Fest at the New Lark, the Billie Holiday Theater, the Ensemble Studio Theater in New York, where she is a company member. She's been published by DPS, Sam French, and Routledge Press. She's currently based in Los Angeles, where she serves as the community engagement coordinator at the Fountain Theater. She has been a guest on the podcast Global Black Voices and the Farm Theater's Bullpen. Okay, and then joining us as well are two more incredible artists. Nic Brierre Aziz is a Haitian New Orleanian interdisciplinary artist and curator. His current practice is deeply community-focused and rooted around the utilization of personal and collective histories to reimagine the future. In addition to his personal artistic practice, he currently serves as the community engagement curator for the New Orleans Museum of Art. He has contributed to publications such as HuffPost, Burnaway, and Afropunk, and his work has been featured by the Oxford American, the Associated Press, and the Alternative UK. He has been a recipient of several notable artist residencies and fellowships, and most recently was selected as a 2020 Andy Warhol Foundation Curatorial Fellow and a 2021 Joni Mitchell Center Artist in Residence. He obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree from Morehouse College and a Master of Science degree from the University of Manchester in the UK. And then last, Èzili Dantò is a human rights and international law attorney, an award-winning playwright, performance poet, and cultural activist. She was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and raised in the US. She is a Haitian scholar and runs the Èzili Network, the Free Haiti Movement, the Haitian Lawyers Leadership Network, Zili Designs, and Zili Dilo, Clean Water, Renewable Power, and Skills Transfer for Haiti. Èzili is the author of 10 plays and 2 book series. She regularly conducts Haiti teach-ins on the non-colonial narrative on Haiti, centering on Haiti's wealth, natural resources, revolutionary culture, voodoo spirituality, and her expression of this through the voodoo jazz oetry performance productions. Èzili was featured as a Haitian scholar and historian in the documentary 1804, The Hidden History of Haiti. In 2018, Èzili was honored at the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame for her lifetime of justice and cultural advocacy work. So let's bring our panel on now that you've learned a little about them. We're so excited to have this incredible, illustrious group of artists and thinkers and powerhouse humans with us. So happy Haitian Heritage Month, y'all.
Yeah.
So I wanted, get into it and definitely get to everybody. I just want to start first with Candice, as this is a conversation, in conversation with her incredible film Fatherland, and which is available cinemahcx.org for the rest of the month for free on our website. You can watch it through the month of May. Go Haitian Heritage Month. So Candice, could you share a little bit, just to start, what is Fatherland? How did it come to be? What's the origin story? Who are the collaborators? What inspired it? Just give us a little bit of a rundown to start the conversation.
Yeah. Fatherland, I usually say, is the piece that I didn't want to write, but wanted to be written. It started, my father, who is Haitian, but I did not grow up with him. He passed in February 2019, and flying to Brooklyn, New York to unknowingly at the time plan a funeral for essentially a man who'd been on the periphery of my life for my entire life. The process of planning that funeral began to highlight what it meant to be connected to this man, and through him, what it meant to be connected to the island of Haiti, what it meant to be connected to a culture and a homeland that felt disconnected from. but after his death wanted very much to connect with me. And so I started to write memoir things that I had no intention of ever showing to anybody. And I started to write it, and it became very obvious pretty early on that I felt like my father wanted to write this piece with me. I was very opposed to the idea. And how it started to evolve was the show started to become a container for larger questions, which are about diaspora disconnection, what happens when lineages are separated. And what started to reveal was the ways in which Haitian Vodou, offered answers to some of these questions about how we can connect to what seem like lost lineages across time and space, and what does the spiritual system offer in terms of redemption or exploration of identity. And so I drew heavily on that because that wanted to reveal itself. And the show became a container for a community grief ritual, which is how do we honor ancestors who may feel very dishonorable? My father's life itself was very dishonorable. And how might we bear unbearable stories? And I relied heavily on Haitian Vodou to help give context to how we might bear unbearable stories and give honor to stories that we may feel in our life are dishonorable. So that's how the show came into being, which is kind of heavy and also a very interesting turn of events, considering where I was in February 2019 without having any idea about where this would lead. And I had some wonderful collaborators in Houston. It got funded by the city of Houston. So Leandre Douglas was my choreographer and movement advisor. Ebony Bell with Stages was my director. Stages was really great in stepping in to present the project. And it happened during COVID. So what started out as a participatory site-specific experience had to be adapted digitally. And Nate Edwards was a filmmaker as far as making the film element that undergirds the entire performance. So a wonderful Houston collaborators. I love them all very much. They were very talented and definitely held space for me as it's very personal and it's very vulnerable and is meant to be ceremony and not necessarily purely passive performance. So great, very grateful to them.
No, thank you for providing that background. And yeah, I mean, right, this theme of visual storytelling across the Haitian diaspora, and you brought up the role, I mean, you've talked about a kind of subversive role of voodoo in this film and in the work, you know, and Èzili, maybe we'll start with you on that. And talk a little bit about, could you share with our audience a little bit about your name and, you know, the role of voodoo in your work and and how, you know, in celebration of, you know, Haitian heritage, like how it connects up to, you know, just your identity and what you're expressing and kind of the lens through which you are creating your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it was a journey for me to get to Èzili Dantò. Obviously, I, like most Haitian, still had carried the colonial French name. So in that journey, I found the archetype in Haitian Vodou that most represented what was most forceful about my personality. I'm a defender. And so Èzili Dantò came to me, but it was a journey. I went back to, I was born in Haiti, but we came here because of the imperialism. And so all of my work deals with that overarching ceiling that all Haitian lives lives under. And that overarching ceiling is that we are forced into exile because of a political situation of domination in Haiti. And being forced into exile in that way, you lose the connection with the ancestors, with the land, with the language. I speak Creole with an English accent. And so my personal story is that I went back to Haiti as the lawyer for the first democratically elected president. I have always worked on a dual level, as an artist and as an attorney, as a defender, because that's what I am. And in Vodun and in Haitian culture, there's no box like we have in European culture. There's just no box. There's all of my art comes out of my legal work.
Mm-hmm.
So that the first piece I wrote was called Red, Black and Moonlight. It's because when I got to Haiti, what I found there wasn't representative of what was in me. So I made a call to the ancestors. And like Fatherland, it was a journey on stage of calling the ancestors and asking them, where are you? What are these? And they gave me textures. And those textures was red, black, and moonlight. I did not know at that point in time that would be my life. Red, black. We are now in May. Every Haitian is going to be celebrating the Haitian flag, and they're going to celebrate the flag of the conqueror, and I'm going to be celebrating the red and black flag. So that is how all of my work is called Art with Soul. It's reaching back. The name comes from the warrior mother, Èzili Dantò, in Haitian mythology, in Haitian archetype, in Haitian cosmology. On August 14th, 1791, after 300 years of enslavement, the Africans in Haiti called on the Great Mother. They were the only group of Black folks that did not go to the European or the Judeo-Christian way of being. So they called on the ancestors. And I found myself in that space. And so Èzili Dantò is the Divine Mother. She is the representation of womanhood, warriorship, nurture, and defend. And it's called the Metet in Vodun. It is the spirit and vibration of the universe that most meshes with my personality and how I issue into the world. All of my plays deal with, I have the Bois-Caïman play, which is a reenactment of the revolution and Èzili coming. And I use poetry, dance, and to express it. So I have so every year, the plays that I do are cyclical and they mesh with Haitian history. So we start with August 14th with the reenactment of the Haitian Revolution. We go down to the Jean-Jacques Dessalines. I have the story of Jean-Jacques, who is Haiti's founding father, and all the warrior women who influenced him, because he was raised by a Dahomian warrior, Grand Toya. And in that play, I play each of those women. Grand Guiton, who was his spiritual advisor, Sani Belair, who was a lieutenant. I play these women of the Haitian Revolution between September and October, and I travel the world with those plays. And then in November, I do Vertier. Vertier is the final battle of the Haitian Revolution, and we reenact that. For instance, to come to the apocalyptic Haiti earthquake, the play I wrote is called Seismic Shift, and freestyling to murder Tarzan, Jane, and their Uncle Toms. So all of my work comes from my experiences, how I issue into the world. The very first one was when I came back from Haiti the first time. It's called Between Falling and Hitting the Ground. And that's how I felt.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, we're so lucky to have you here, and what a powerful way to celebrate Haitian Heritage Month for sure. Let's go to Nic next, a man on the move, literally. Hi, Nic. Can you hear us? I'm not sure if you can. Nic, are you there? All right, we'll go back to Nic. Maybe we'll check in with him in the chat. But let's talk to France next, who also just has such an incredible body of work. Candice really, brought together just such incredible heavy hitters for this conversation. I mean, can you just, maybe touch on some of the same themes, but maybe really just like, what are your thoughts about this idea of visual storytelling and that the lens of Haiti and Haitianness and where that comes in? Just your thoughts about that and your lens and your approach.
Well, I think my aesthetic, it's funny, as I was listening to Èzili, there are a lot of similarities. My plays, Tigress of Saint-Domingue and Deux Femmes on the Edge de la Revolution, are the first two plays in a trilogy I've been writing about the Haitian Revolution. So Cécile Fatima and Nic Brierre actually made a character who's a composite of those two. And my play, it's so funny, Deux Femmes, my play starts immediately after Bois-Caïma. And during the Haitian Revolution, the rebels gained strength and guidance and wisdom from the Loas. So they are all characters also in my plays. And there is, I have that same kind of thing happening in those plays where there's a duality. All of the characters are also led and guided by a Loa. And they have, as Èzili said, they have a Loa who embodies their human characteristics of what drives them. And so as far as visual storytelling, it's an interesting question, because I guess I don't compartmentalize like the kind of storyteller. Like I'm just a storyteller.
Yeah, let's just focus. I mean, you guys are all so like dynamic, and there's so many layers
I just mean
to what everybody's doing. So yeah.
I just mean in my plays there are they are sensual. They appeal. I use all of the senses, so they're visual. There's movement, there's sound, there's like all of it comes together. And then I guess it depends on what story I'm telling, which of those sensory details sort of emerge as a focal point. Mm-hmm. In Tigress and Deux Femmes, and I have a play, Silence of the Mambo. They figure very prominently, but then I have other plays that are very intimate stories, just about human relationships. I have a play, The Talk, that is produced often, and it's really just about a mother-daughter, but it's also about what Candice was referring to, that generational gap that is also heightened by two generations that basically grew up in two different countries. This phenomena that most of us who are first generationers go through, where, I grew up, both of my parents are from Haiti. I was born in Africa, but we grew up in America. And so in the house, my parents would speak to us in Creole and we would answer back in English. My grandmother spoke no English at all, so we only spoke Creole to her. And so there's this kind of mix of everything happening in one household. So I write a lot about that experience and how that impacts relationships and how that is specific to Haitian families, Haitian women.
And how does it impact you, and how is it specific? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what I explore in my work are the complexities of that. So the complexities of a mother and daughter. So the talk, it's a dramedy, and it's about a mother-daughter having the talk, but it's the other way around. It's the mother coming to her adult daughter for advice about sex. And but it opens the door to the ways that they've they grew up with different belief systems. This adult daughter who grew up in America grew up with very different ideas about sexuality and who her body belongs to and how she moves through the world in her body, whereas her mother is kind of a traditional Haitian woman who grew up as a Catholic and has like very Christian-based ideas about sexuality and a woman's role. And so, I mean, that's just an example of just the complexities. And then so then a family striving to come to an understanding. All of those issues sort of compound the tension, I think, in those relationships. You know, there's a lot of love in Haitian families. There's a lot of love in my family, but there's also a lot of room for misunderstanding, miscommunication, and there's a lot of work to be done in terms of understanding one another. Right. You know, I mean, like in my house, some of us, we literally spoke a different language, you know, like between my brothers and I, some of us were better at Creole than the others. My grandmother spoke no English, and so, when we get like our extended family together, there's the literal communication blocks, plus where we are generationally, philosophically, spiritually. So I'm just, I don't want to make any general statements, but as a playwright, I'm really interested in all of those complexities and all of the nuances that come out of that.
Yeah. And I guess like some of those complexities weave through all of your work and definitely, Candice, your work as well. And this kind of, micro experience, do you think, and this is a question for everybody, do these kind of themes, and maybe this is too much of a generalization, just let me know, become a kind of stand-in for the kind of macro experiences of the diaspora, kind of more broadly, and kind of that love and misunderstanding across these different cultures, and the kind of macro experience of like cross-generational understanding? And I guess really what I'm asking is like, where is kind of like the larger Black diaspora in your work thematically, and and where does like Haitian identity get foregrounded, and how do these things kind of intersect and this is for everybody, kind of intersect, intertwine, interrelate?
I think for me, my father being pretty absent, or on the periphery, but his mother and his other siblings really kind of pulling for me. I grew up with my mother, who is American, and I often found that in the like collective African American identity, I found some resonance, but I couldn't find resonance within that larger narrative, the African Americanness, for what it means to be a daughter of an immigrant. Like there wasn't a lane for that. And so I felt like with Fatherland specifically, and sometimes geographically, there's not a lot of nuance to discussions about Black identity that are inclusive, that some of our Black identities involve immigration, right? And the way that US imperialism works in other countries that are not America, right? And the way that these cultures and identities form as a result of that. And so I felt like...
But can you just repeat the last thing you said?
Yeah, and the way that culture and identity forms via leaving a country and coming to another country, especially in terms of my dad and the story of immigration and how hard it is to get American immigration and what's going on back home, and then how that integrates in terms of your identity. There wasn't, for me, a lot of place to explore that element, and I wasn't seeing it highlighted anywhere where anybody was talking about what it means to be Haitian or what it means to be first generation, but perhaps not African, but from another colonial place. And so I felt like being able to highlight some of the nuances of Black identity or African diaspora as it relates to Haiti specifically was an important narrative. It's an important narrative to highlight so people can have a more intersectional even discourse of what it means to be Black and what that experience even is.
And if you know, if you guys could also, you know, share your thoughts, you know, on this, and just just the place of this kind of broader African diaspora and how Haiti fits into that, is inside it, is outside of it, just, you know, in your work and those themes. And and we got Nic back. Yay. Nic, can you hear us?
Can y'all hear me?
Oh, right. We're gonna all right. So Nic, we're gonna just, because we haven't heard from Nic yet, so we're just hold that thought, ladies. We're gonna come back to you. Let's just get Nic in the conversation, because we had some sound problems before. We worked it out. And also just to note, like, you're doing a lot of like installation work, right? And like, so it's a little bit different from like kind of the writing tip. And that's a kind of different orientation. And it is kind of, you know, this very, you know, working in these really, really super visual mediums, right? So, could you just, you know, touch upon like that, you know, in celebration of Heritage Month, that, you know, that lens, that presence, that background, that literacy, that centering, those values, where it comes in your work, and just share with us a little bit about that?
Sure. Sorry about the audio issues.
No, it happens.
So I think, you know, for me, a lot of my work just starts with my family heritage. Obviously, like everyone else, my grandfather was born in Damarie, Haiti, in 1915, and he started a Haitian art collection in 1944, and then collected with my grandmother throughout their lifetimes. And it's now over 400 pieces of Haitian artwork. And so I got to just grow up around that my entire life, and I think just be influenced by that, just that beauty, those images, and that history. And so in terms of my installations or my mixed media assemblages, I think that thread, you know, goes throughout them all, just that influence from my childhood, but also, for those who don't know, Haiti deeply influenced New Orleans' culture. And so in 1809, following the Haitian Revolution,
Haiti deeply influenced what culture?
New Orleans' culture.
New Orleans' culture. Got it. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So following the Haitian Revolution, 1809, nearly 10,000 Haitians, free people of color, enslaved people, came to New Orleans and brought many of the traditions and spot food and architecture that we see in the city. And so I think, you know, that's a history that's very under discussed in New Orleans. And so a lot of my work, I think, visually tries to touch upon those connections. And even thinking about something like the 1811 rebellion that happened in New Orleans as well. It was the largest rebellion of enslaved people in North American history. And it was led by Charles Deslandes, who was believed to be a Haitian man. And so, you know, I have a series of works that kind of touches upon that as well. And so, just I think always kind of thinking about those connections and those threads is something that's deep within my practice.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, yeah, New Orleans, man, it's like, it's really, it doesn't get credit, but it really is like where any kind of American cosmopolitanism is born. I mean, New Orleans was New York in a lot of ways before New York, in terms of, you know, the representation and really being, you know, it really is kind of like the seat of American civilization, even though it doesn't get that credit. And when we talk about, like, you know, urban culture, New Orleans is where this happened first.
Yeah, I learned
intermingling before any place in the U.S. It wasn't in Boston. It wasn't, you know. So yeah, it's a really interesting history, right?
Yeah, I was listening to something maybe like a year or so ago, and it was talking about the shotgun house, and obviously that's a style that comes from West Africa into New Orleans via Haiti. And the shotgun house apparently was the first, I believe, house to have a porch in the United States. And so, like, to me, that made me think about just like that idea of like congregating and like how prominent porch culture is in a city like New Orleans, and like how that really starts kind of like just the social culture. So yeah, I think to your point, it's very deep and rich there.
Yeah. And I guess this is a question for you and everybody else, besides Candice who spoke on this, just like, the African diaspora, Haiti, and like where do these two ideas like fit into all of y'all's work? How much is like Haiti centered? How much is it folded into an idea of the African diaspora? Or, just if you could just talk, how much you kind of foreground one or the other, how much they play into your work, those ideas, those kind of pillars.
So I was saying that most of my work mirrors what I experience in life, and the patterns to me in Haiti and the patterns in America at the macro level are the same. So for instance, I was an entertainment attorney, and then when I went to Haiti, I was representing the president of Haiti. I found the same white liberal problem of other white supremacy trying to represent what was mine. And I found myself fighting in the same way I fought in the entertainment industry with clients. I used to represent hip hop clients, and they would, as soon as they got Grammy Award, there would be that competition, and that societal white supremacy was there. Same thing in Haiti. So I made it sort of my mission to speak for Haiti. Before the Free Haiti movement, before the Èzili Network, most of the people speaking for Haiti 20, 25 years ago were white folks. We worked really hard to change that. So for me, imperialism is the over domination, white supremacy, racism. These are very tragic, but they are overarching with regards to how my work expresses itself. For instance, I have a piece called School's Out, and I say that Papa left Haiti, but Haiti has cast a shadow that locked him inside. So on stage, it didn't go away just because he moved to America, right? It cast a shadow that locked him inside, that affected us and made me want to find out what was that struggle that led a man who felt he was somebody, and then when he came here, he was washing dishes and it destroyed him. What was that? And how can I change it? How could I go back and change it? So, and I think that journey is an African journey. I think that journey is a Black American journey. I think that we all have that in common. We might have, different languages and different cultures, but IT is like uniquely different. And of course, I am prejudiced. Uniquely different in that we were the only nation, the only group of people in world history to actually take the place of the masters. So that in my work, when I travel, people like, the Haitians are coming, the Haitians are coming. They have this, the Black world is very proud of what Haiti did. And in that way, we have a path towards where we're going, because Dessalines stood for Black independent nation. And so this is where the African nations are trying to move towards, not neocolonialism. So in my work, that sovereignty, what we're looking for, it's the same. The imperialism, though, brings a lot of divisions in the macro. Everyone has a micro story that's different, but in the macro, we are all fighting this idea of scattered seeds. I have a piece called Scattered Seeds, I say things like, I found myself walking around in New York, in Paris, and Senegal. I find myself in these places. And this exile, feeling of exile, of not having a space, Red, Black, and Moonlight, that's what it talks about, right? But it's not just not having a homeland and a space, but it goes even more for me cosmologically. When you look at the culture that I was engrafted into, and the culture that's trying to assimilate us, well, that culture, I have a piece where I talk about, I'm lost in that red, a red that wants a woman, a symbolic mother of the species to get with biological fatalism, ageism, and sexism. I'm lost in that space. There's no setting for me in the space where Cain had a future and Abel disappeared. That's how my work is expressed. And then I live it as a defender. One example, the UN came into Haiti and they gave us cholera, which Haiti had never had. So my little niece, the Dramatic Guild of America asked me to put together something, but they didn't expect what I was going to say, because they wanted me to put something together that dealt with the duopoly and what Trump had said about Haiti being this whole, right? But from my experience, from my work, how is it possible that the UN could kill more than 10,000 people and the world is silent? And, Obama comes into court and says they have immunity. So in explaining that, so I did a piece with my 5-year-old niece, and we go on stage. And the title of that piece is, how do you tell a 5-year-old that the UN is not potty trained? So that's how my work is expressed.
Or kind of keep the sound stuff together. And and France, could you share a little bit? And then I wanted to just, building off what you were saying, Èzili, what about this shared African diaspora, revolutionary love, right? Because there's also the story of what happened in Haiti and then how it ignited so much of Latin America and how many revolutions that followed. And that story doesn't also, I think, get told enough, right? There's always the talk about the French Revolution and and what that ignited, or the American, but what happened in Haiti also ignited at that time, not even a century later when we had the independence movement in Africa, but at that time, all of the slave rebellion throughout Latin America because of what happened in Haiti. So, France, could you talk a little bit about that, the kind of African diasporic shared, revolutionary love, and I also want to get into this idea of Afrofuturism, and I would like you guys to all kind of just talk about that and where that fits into your work or not, that idea.
It's France-Luce, by the way.
Oh, sorry, France.
Okay. Well, I think this question for me is very similar to the question, the previous question you asked, at least in my work. I also am really interested in the parallels between what's happening in Haiti and the rest of the world, or how what's happening in Haiti, the work that Haitian activists do, the parallels between that and activists in America, activists in Nicaragua. So for example, my play The Devil's Salt is about Jean-Dominique, who was known as a journalist. He was a very popular critic of the Duvalier dictatorship, but he started his career as an agronomist. And my play focuses on that part of his life and career. in the 60s. And when I wrote it, I was really interested in how his work then and what was happening in Haiti then is in conversation with America now. The government, the dictatorship, they were very suspicious of scientists and science. They did not, because they saw in the work that Jean-Dominique was doing at that time was using the principles of science to help farmers who were working for wealthy landowners, many of them white, many of them part of the wealthy class. And so there's this whole connection to capitalism, to a class system that is unjust, that Jean-Dominique was already hip to and was really trying to fight against. And we see that all throughout activist movement in this country. And so I'm interested, so I like to try to challenge my audiences. They don't maybe know about Jean-Dominique. They don't know about what was happening in Haiti in the 60s and maybe think, well, that has nothing to do with me. But then when they see the play, it's actually very similar. And all of that is a result of white supremacy, and all of that is a legacy of colonialism. And so in that sense, all of the diaspora, we all are kind of still in the same struggle. We have been in the same struggle throughout decades and centuries. And then even, I'm also really interested in my work, how different cultures of the diaspora are in conversation with each other, and also the tension. My play Boat People takes place in Miami in the 80s when there was a lot of xenophobia against the Haitian community. And so it explores that, it's from the perspective of, a 13-year-old girl who wants to fit in, and how this xenophobic movement impacts a young girl growing up in Miami. But again, all of that, I grew to learn that attitude, that anti-Haitian sentiment that was in Miami and a lot of the country, and in some places it still is, that also is learned behavior as a result of white supremacy. So, I don't know, all roads lead to white supremacy. So that's how we find this connection. The residency I did in Bahia, I wanted to explore the candomblé spiritual practice, because I was really interested in how that is in conversation with Haitian voodoo. So those are the ways that I see parallels and connections.
But it sounds like you're also saying all roads lead to resistance to that also.
Yeah. And as Èzili, so beautifully articulated, I mean, from the time that we liberated ourselves, we've always been a culture of people who resist, and what's happening in Haiti now. I mean, it's really, it's difficult to observe, but it's because we are a people who resist. We resist. We're not passive. We're not a passive culture. And, I can even, as myself as an artist, I've had people tell me, well, why do you write about Haiti? Why don't you just write about, just being American? And, you would never ask a Black American who's writing about the Black American experience in the way that most people think of the Black American experience. You've never asked a Jewish person, why are you writing about Jewish people? I'm writing it because, I'm proud to be Haitian, and I don't care if certain companies are not going to produce me. It's that resistance that is just a part of my DNA. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, totally. And in terms of that resistance being part of all y'all's DNA, I read something recently, I can't remember where, but the point was being made that if there's a corrupt government in Haiti, the Haitian people are going to get rid of it, inevitably. And that's very Haitian to just ultimately it's always going to be weeded out. And that's very much in the DNA. I don't know if you agree with that, but. remember reading that recently.
Yeah, to some degree. Well, it's interesting. I do think that Haitian people are always engaged in the political process. Like here in America, once Trump was elected, then everybody woke up and everybody wanted to be like engaged. But Haitian people are always completely engaged.
Right, to the point about the earthquake and the Clintons and the Obamas and all of this shenanigans that happened. Yeah. Nic, how about you? I know you consider yourself somebody who's like looking towards the future. I think I read that in your bio. There's an idea of futurism. So, could you talk a little bit about the role of Afrofuturism, and or not, and where you see that in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of, to me, the future is that idea of increased connection. Kind of what we're already speaking about. I think, some of my work in the research, like I've been looking at just those underdiscussed connections in other places like Cuba or Brazil, and thinking about, like there was this piece of research that I came across that talked about how 1822 in Brazil, in the expression of social revolt, and it was referred to as Haitianismo, in letters and documents and newspapers. And so to me, like, that just like struck me. It was just so profound to me. That idea that 20 years after the revolution, in Latin America, like this idea of the fear of the plantation economy just being destructed in these different places. And it's like, I think that connection can be seen in places like Cuba or even Colombia, or just across Latin America. Also, I think as Black Americans, we don't necessarily associate with Blackness all the time. And so, like, I think like that idea of increasing that knowledge and those connections between these places is part of the future. Yeah.
What about the idea of Afro-pessimism?
I'm recently learning about that, and I think someone told me recently, like, it's the idea of Blackness dying, or like that's one, I guess, part of the theory. And yeah, I don't know where I sit on the spectrum of that, because I think there's this part of it where I think you're restricting the construct of Blackness, which was in some ways given to us or conditioned into us to think, oh, this is Black versus this is not Black, or you can do this and this. Like, so to me, I mean, I think I resonate with those aspects of it, because I think the idea of Haiti being this country that really led independence, the idea of freedom, for an entire hemisphere of people, and that not being associated to specific things. I think at least in the United States, like, we associate Blackness with specific things, and I think this idea of true freedom being that there is no limit to Blackness. So I think in terms of Afro-pessimism, maybe that's kind of where I fall within that spectrum.
Thanks. Y'all, we're going to wrap it up soon. So, audience members, people on YouTube, send some questions. We want to get some of your questions in there. We're winding things down. So now's the time to please send your questions. Candice, I saw you nodding a bit. Please jump in there.
Yeah, I was just agreeing with Nic a lot. I have this project called 30 Ways to Get Free, which is a series of liberatory microplays that all consider Black as an expansive concept, kind of using space as a model. How Black is defined in space is kind of limitless and endless possibilities, a generative space, and liberation as an expansive concept, micro, macro, but the plays don't center white supremacy at all, or even a realm in which these are talked about, even in the conception of what liberation is, because I think, for me, that's oftentimes the difficulty, is you can't get free of a thing that you can't think past. So how self-defined can I be, and what mythical creatures might assist in that? And I do have 2 microplays in conversation. One was commissioned by the Latinx Playwrights Circle in New York, And the first plays center around two teenage girls, Afro-Latinx teenage girls. One is pregnant and sees that her possibilities on Earth are limited, and builds a device to communicate with extraterrestrials to get abducted.
Which is a great play.
I'm so into it. And so 100 years into the future now, there are two teens, a boy and a girl, cousins, who are in IT, and one of them has had a dream, and she's looking for this land that their grandmother must have left behind, but they don't know where it is. And through this connection of Papa Legba and her connecting, that what portal is opened is actually in the bloodline, whereby the ancestors that left 100 years ago are now in space on a planet called Guinea, who desire to come back and build a laku on a land that is theirs. And so, just looking towards the stars as a homeland and looking towards where might the ancestors live, how might they help us reconstruct identity, is something that I'm much more interested in. That Afro-pessimism seems to analyze the situations as they stand now, the structures as they stand now. And that's great. But as artists, as an academic, right, as a BA Black Studies, MPA, Masters in Public Administration, I'm interested in the data and the structural analysis. However, as artists, I don't have to abide by that. I can imagine endless futures, endless possibilities. And that is the generative space, I think, is to kind of like Harriet Tubman. Yeah, I'm enslaved now, but I see a place where people are free. And I don't have to, although physically I may be constrained, you will not constrain the fact that I can pull into a future and pull into a past, and in my present create a liberated self now. So I think as artists, I'm much more interested in that, knowing the structure so that I can now use my imagination as a tool for liberating myself.
Amen to that. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap thing up. A parting question for everybody before we wrap. Speaking of celebration and Black joy, let's start with France-Luce. How are y'all celebrating Haitian Heritage Month? Yay! Go Haitian Heritage Month. And any like parting thoughts, anything you want to say in conclusion. Also, anything you want to share with the audience in conclusion. Let's start with France-Luce. Please share.
Every month is Haitian Heritage Month.
Exactly. That's the right answer.
It's the work that I do. So every time I sit down to write, it's Haitian Heritage Month, because I'm always celebrating my culture and my identity as a Haitian American. So that's how I'm celebrating. I'm telling our stories.
Yeah. Well, that is the answer. I don't know if there's like another one besides that. Exactly. Yeah. Word up. That's the right way to respond to that question for sure. Unless there's anything, like specific that anybody is doing in celebration this month. But is there any, Èzili, Nic, Candice, any kind of parting thoughts, anything you want to share in conclusion with the audience as we... Oh, and then also Candice, before we finish, just share about, for people in Houston, the public, program that you're doing at Stages. Let's make sure we get that in there. Oh, and anything, that's really important. Anything, anything you all want to share about your work, what's coming up. That's the important point that we need the audience to know about. What have you all got going on? That's what we should end with. Yeah. So let's go back to France-Luce. Anything you want to share about upcoming projects, and then we'll work our way down to Èzili and Nic and Candice. So France-Luce, please share.
Yeah, so sorry for the noise, LA. I'm heading to Miami on Sunday. I've been commissioned by a Juggernaut Theater Company, and I'm going to be writing 3 plays about 3 historically Black neighborhoods in Miami, including Little Haiti, Overtown, and Coconut Grove. And I'm going to spend 2 weeks with the historian Marvin Dunn. And then from there, I go to Williamstown Theater Festival. My play Ghosts of the Diaspora is going to premiere at Williamstown Theater Festival in June. And then I've got some other things in the fall, but those are the 2 that are coming up.
So excited about the projects in Miami. Whoa, that's amazing. I love that. That's really cool. Èzili, could you share what you have coming up? Anything that our audience should look out for? Anybody that, people are going to watch this after tonight, it's going to be on YouTube. Anything that we need to, let people know about, to look out for?
Sure. When you talked about that Afrofuturism, I just wanted to say that I think Creole is one of the biggest language on Twitter right now. So the resistance is being social media is a way of Haitians without a voice. They're now getting a voice. It's not Miami Herald and New York Times telling our colonial story and showing this violence. One part of my work is to show that there's more violence in Bahamas and Jamaica than there is in Haiti, but then there's this perception, and Haitians don't know. So all of my work is to change those perceptions, and a lot of Haitians now are out there because we have more space because of technology, so that our voices, even if large performance centers and other places don't bring us in, we can go on YouTube. So in terms of the future, I think that envisioning who we are is something that's internal. And as Candice was saying, it's cosmic, because Vodun is about a cosmic people. So for me, May is for the Free Haiti movement. You guys know that the hashtag went viral. So please use it to keep it going, because our people are suffering tremendously. I use every platform, wherever I am. It's about not only Black empowerment, Black achievement, because for me, Black is the center of the sun. It's the creation. And Jean-Jacques Dessalines, our founding father, left us a philosophy that's unmatched in this planet. He said that Black was not just biological. It is the color of liberty. So that even the few hundred Europeans who fought in the Haitian Revolution were defined as Black. So I stand before everyone as someone who runs the Free Haiti movement, and I say that we are the color of liberty, and anyone who wants to stand with us is Black.
Word. Nic, can you hear us? Oh, I think he's frozen. Yeah. So just what do we? So we just want to wrap with like anything that anybody that checks us out today, that checks us out later. This video is going to stay up on YouTube. Like, what do you have going on? And just parting thoughts, food for thought as we go into the evening, and anything you want to share about what you have coming up.
Yeah, so I have a series of video works that I've been working on. One was shown at a museum known as the Ogden Museum in New Orleans from September to February of last year. And the video works are all exploring the objectification of the Black artifact versus the Black body. And so just thinking about kind of those relationships throughout history. And so the first one was entitled Pimpin' and Easy. And it was looking at the history of museums and their histories of looting African objects. And then there's a follow-up to that video called The Block is Hot, which is looking at art auctions, slave auctions, and just that idea of the body versus the artifact. And the third one's called Juicy Fruit, which I'm finishing right now. And so, yeah, I mean, those are current projects that, if there are any institutions, organizations that are interested in showing that, I have that. And I'm also working on a series of artworks that are exploring, again, the Black body, but then about the fleur-de-lis. And its complex history of at one point being used to brand runaway slaves. But obviously now it is the most prominent symbol in New Orleans. And so these works are just kind of questioning, not necessarily saying that we need to do away with that symbol, but just kind of questioning its history and using installations and different artworks to do that.
Nice. You guys are just kind of twiddling your thumbs and not really doing anything and smelling the roses. So Candice, let's wrap up with you, and please share about the upcoming stages outdoor screening in Houston for folks that, are local and want to check it out.
Yes. So in addition to Fatherland, which again acts as a grief ritual. So if you have a candle and you have a cup of water and some tea, please participate with me at the end. That will be up on Houston Cinema Art Society the whole month of May for free to digitally stream. And if you are in person and you're in Houston, you can watch it on like a Jumbotron screen at Stages Theater on the Brown Foundation lawn. They've got the lawn sectioned out in pods, so you can reserve a pod with up to 4 people of your choosing. And we're trying to get some Haitian vendors out, and we have a Haitian food truck. I'm super excited about that. So they'll be there, which if you're not from Houston, you don't know how rare that is to find, but a Taste of Haiti food truck will be there. And it's on Flag Day, on Haitian Flag Day Tuesday, May 18th, and it starts at 8 p.m. So if you come a little early, get some food, shop with the vendors, and enjoy that. And in July, I've got my series of 3 films, 3 Afrofuturism films. I'm super excited. I'm super excited. I just watched another cut today. So those will come out as a part of Catastrophic Theater's digital season. So that'll be in July. And the alien abduction one will be in that as well as some spontaneous combustors and a transdimensional cell phone to men in prison. So it deals a lot with how sci-fi might help us understand what abolition could be. And then later in the year in Houston, I have a commission with Diverse Works for a site-specific community-created grief ritual revolving around the Sugarland 95, which are the 95 bodies of the convict lease inmates whose bodies were essentially dumped in this area in Sugarland, Texas, between 1897 and 1907. And so with the community at large, we're going to be creating a grief ritual to honor these bodies who have been reinterred into the ground and really spiritually and energetically clearing the space and allowing ourselves through the use of diasporic and African ancestral funerary traditions to really honor and give voice to the histories of our people in all lands, and also use it as a place. It's called Whale. So using our voices as a place to begin to explore abolition. And we know that the convict leasing system is the precursor to the carceral state as we know it. And so going back to the roots and saying, how might we conceive? How might we pull from the past into the future? And how might we do differently? And using voice, song, drumming to explore that. So that'll be in October in Houston. It'll be pretty large. So I'm excited about that.
Wow. Powerful work, man. Y'all are doing it. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your thinking and your incredible work. And thank you for you. Thank you. And thanks, Candice. And everybody watch Fatherland, and everybody look out for France-Luce's work and Èzili's work and Nic's work and support them. They are incredible artists in the world doing their thing. And shout out to Haiti and everything it has given us, which is so much, including y'all. And thank you. And thanks for joining us, audience, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. I think we're off. All right. Bye.